I really had great plans for myself, and none of them realized. It was just the beginning. I didn't even know. I had no idea. I didn't know anything. And I came in with compassion and understanding. Hi, and welcome to my channel. If you are new to me, my name is Yael Gilboa, and this is the Uplifting Lifestyle Vision channel, which is all about aging with fun and flair. Thursday, October 1st, 2:15, a few minutes after 2 p.m., I get this phone call that I've been dreading for a very long time. My sister called and said, "Mom fell. We called the ambulance. Come quick." And this was the beginning of a journey, very long journey of taking care of two disabled parents. Both are in their 90s. My father with deteriorating dementia, and my mom in a wheelchair. I remember that day very clearly. I remember thinking what I had to take with me to the hospital. I knew that I had to spend the night there. My sisters were not made for it. And I was packing things just to take me with me. I knew that in the hospital it is cold. I knew that I won't be able to sleep properly. And all that kept running through my mind as I was packing and preparing to go. And I knew that life has changed. So my parents were already dependent, but independent. My father had dementia. We already had a caregiver, but that event kind of turned everything on its head. This phone call set us on a journey. It was a long journey. It was just the beginning. I didn't even know. I had no idea what kind of a journey it was going to be. I didn't know how hard it was going to be. I didn't know any of the pitfalls that we were going to face. I didn't know anything that day. All I could think about is what I'm going to pack to go to the hospital. I knew that I had to spend the night there, and that's it. So I rushed there and I stayed with my mom in the hospital that night, and it took them a few days to decide to operate and replace her hip bone. And she was, part of the time, she was kind of delirious. And then we started the hospital shift between us, the sisters, and some of the grandchildren also came in. And if there was one thing that my mom hated, it's being helpless and being dependent on others. And those two things happened on that day. She became helpless and she became dependent on others. She could do nothing for herself, almost nothing for herself. She could still eat. That was what she could do. She could put her lipstick on. She always did. But that's it. She was dependent completely. It took them about a week, I think, to decide to operate. And they replaced her hip bone. And mind you, my mom was 92, I think, at the time, or 93 even. So she was not a young woman. And usually people in her condition do not last over a year after the operation. It's very, very, very rare for them to live much longer after such a fall. And she lived. She lived for 2.5 years. And although she was in a wheelchair, she had so much will to live and so much passion for life that she kind of tried to take everything and anything that she could out of it. But there were so many pitfalls and so many things and so many lessons for us and for her and for my dad, I think. So what I want to share with you today are some of the lessons that I've learned, because I think these are personal lessons and they contributed so much for my self-development, for my personal development, that I think that any one of us can benefit even from things that are basically considered negative. It was really a rare opportunity for me for self-growth. So the first lesson that I had to learn was compassion. My mom, my independent mom, the independent, brave. She was such a brave woman. You know, in her 80s, she had bypass surgery, open heart surgery. And I remember I went to the hospital to be with her, and she was in recovery, I think it called it. And she said, she just she said, go home, you cannot help me now. And she was so independent, you think that the person in her condition would want someone to sit by them, to help them. And she said, no, I have medication, you go home. And I went home. And that's what I remember her with. She had such valor. And then she was in the hospital and she was helpless and she was delirious part of the time. And she needed us for everything and anything, from even, changing diapers, which I think is the most humiliating thing for any adult, and especially if one of your children has to do it for you. And she needed us to help her to eat because she was lying down, she wasn't sitting properly. And to help her, her face, she wouldn't put on makeup, but she put on the lipstick, and she would take off if she had extra hair on her chin. In the 90s they usually grow, and she used to do it on her own, but then in the hospital I just had to do it for her. And then afterwards, but she couldn't see properly. And I think the compassion that I learned to have for her, because she was not an easy woman and she was not an easy mother, and we had a lot of clashes during the years, but I left it all at home or outside the door, and I came in with compassion and understanding, because I had to understand what she was going through. So when you learn to have compassion, I think it's one of the first lessons that I learned, and I'm really, really grateful for this lesson. The other lesson that I learned, and that I'm much more resilient than I thought I were. I'm as resilient as my mom was, because, it was a beginning of a very hard period. Me and my sisters, we would go there. Each one of us visited my parents 3 times a week. It means that we never left them alone. Every day of the week, there was someone from the family with them. Once a week, the whole family would convene. We would eat together. And I think, but it was hard because, my mom, when she was so dependent, they couldn't take a taxi because she was in a wheelchair. At the beginning, we had a very, very heavy wheelchair that we borrowed. And it was something that I had to lift. I think the weight was about 20 kilos. So I had to put her in the car, lift the wheelchair into the car, drive her wherever we wanted to go, and she loved going out. So every time I came and every time my sisters came, we would always go out. And then when we get to our destination, which was mostly was either a cafe or a shopping mall, I had to get out to lift the wheelchair out of the car, and then put her in the wheelchair and push her wherever we had to go, and go and get the drinks and go and get everything. And I was at her beck and call all the time. And I was not alone. We had my father with us, and we had the caregiver with us. We're a lovely Gita. We're so grateful for her. She's still, although both my parents are gone, she's still part of the family. Holidays, when she's not working, she comes over to our house. She was wonderful. But still, I had to do a lot of things, and I discovered that I was resilient. I kept working. Of course, I cut my workload by half, I think. But still, I was working. I tried to do things that were beneficial for me and for my soul. And still, most of my thoughts and most of my focus was on my parents, and especially my mom. So that was the second thing that I learned. The third thing that I had to learn was patience. I needed a lot of patience. Now, what happened, she was still relatively sane, but being under so much anesthesia caused her some brain damage, and she forgot. She was telling us stories all the time, and she used to forget that she already started the story, so she was telling us the stories in loops. Now, she had a very good memory, but still, stories in loops, because she couldn't remember that she's already began the story. And you needed a lot of patience. When I came, she was already dressed, sitting in the front. The wheelchair was parked at the front door. She had the lipstick on. She had the jacket on. She loved to wear white, and she had her handbag in one hand, and she was waiting for me. And she would say, "You're late," because she was already waiting. She wanted to go, but I had to drive for over an hour to get there. So if I left home at around 9 a.m., I arrived there at about 10 or sometimes 10:30. It really depended on the traffic. And she was impatient with me. So I needed a lot of patience. I needed a lot of patience with her requests, with her endless stories. And I needed a lot of patience with old people. So you sometimes need patience, and I had to be zen about it. I needed to get into a zen zone, and I told myself that right now I'm with my parents. That's my focus. I'm not focusing on anything else, and the time with them is sacred. And that's what I wanted to feel, because this was sacred time for us. We knew that we're not going to stay here for a very long time. So every moment counted, and that was important for us, for me and for my sisters, and for the grandchildren, for anyone in the family. So I cherished it, although I needed a lot of patience. Another thing I learned is that you're never going to be free from taking responsibility for another human being. So if you're a parent, you have your children, and then the children grow up, and you might have grandchildren to take care of. And if not them, you have to take care of your parents. So the thing is that you think you're going to be, you're in midlife, you're going to be free, you're going to leave everything behind. It's not always possible. You're not always going to be free. And it's okay. So I had so many plans for my 50s. I didn't believe my parents were going to last that long. And that was that decade of my 50s. That's when my parents were dependent. So, and I really had great plans for myself. And none of them realized. None of them. And I don't regret it. I'm in my 60s now, and I can still do things, and even in my 70s. So I had to postpone some or most of my plans, but it's okay. It's okay. So you're never going to be really free from taking responsibility for someone or something. Even your cat. That's my responsibility at the moment. And I think that the last lesson I learned is about mortality, that I'm mortal and I'm getting older, and one day I'll get to their age, and I hope to do so independent. They were independent until their 90s, and I hope to do so with a clear head and not to have dementia. And I will hope that if I fall, I'll be able to roll over and not break anything. So what I do today is, when I recognize or realize my mortality and how frail I can become, I'm doing my best to strengthen my body, to eat healthily, and take care of any medical issue before it develops into something that is really irreparable. So I don't disregard doctor's orders, and I don't disregard pains and aches and other things. I know I'm mortal. I know my body is for me to keep, and I'm taking good care of my mind and my body. So these are the lessons that I've learned from taking care of my parents. And if you got this far with me, I'm really, really grateful. I hope you got some benefit from this video. And if you enjoyed it, please subscribe, please like. And if you want to see more videos about getting old with fun and flair, please watch this one. And I'll see you in the next video.